Hello everyone. Welcome to the channel Destroyer of Souls with the late night storytelling segment. Today, as usual, I will continue to share with you real spiritual stories from uncles, aunts, brothers, sisters, friends, and younger ones who have sent them to me from all over. In the content of this episode 1, we will come to 2 stories. As you have seen, the title of today's video is Terrifying Haunting, and the first story will truly haunt you. Before we begin, please don't forget to like, share, and most importantly, hit the subscribe button to support Destroyer of Souls. I also hope to receive spiritual stories from the audience through the email address ngyofuang@fenguangmedia.com. Without wasting any more of your time, let's dive into the content of episode 1. The first story is about a friend of mine. Actually, his name is Minh, who is a few years older than me. However, in the email, he considers me a friend, so I also ask for permission to call him a friend, as the age difference between us is not too significant. Currently, Minh is an officer in the United States Army. I want to emphasize one thing that Minh mentioned right at the beginning of the email. He absolutely does not like to discuss political issues. However, due to his job, Minh is easily misunderstood by others, and there are all sorts of rumors going around. At the beginning of the email, Minh reiterated to me that this is his viewpoint. To add a little more about Minh, he was born in 1989 and completed high school in Vietnam. During his time in secondary school, Minh hung out with a group of rather mischievous boys. In this group, later on, there was a person named Tung who went to study abroad in England. Minh is living in the US with his family. Around May 2012, after settling down abroad, Minh received information from an old friend. This friend informed Minh that his family received an email from the London police. Due to not knowing English, the friend asked Minh to read the email for him. The content of the email stated that Tung, a friend from their old group, had been missing for about 2 weeks. However, Minh had recently seen Tung posting on Facebook, looking very happy and healthy. The news of Tung's disappearance seemed absurd. Additionally, at that time, there were many email scams circulating, so Minh didn't think too much about it. He casually remarked, as he claimed to be quite ignorant, "Damn, this is just a scam email, let it be." Minh did not investigate further and hastily concluded that it was a scam email. That evening, while Minh was sleeping, he suddenly had a dream. In the dream, Minh saw himself sitting at his desk, right in his own room. At that moment, Minh was not aware that he was dreaming. Suddenly, there were 3 slow knocks on the door. Knock, knock, knock. Minh thought it must be someone in the house, so he called out, "Who is it? Come in." The door slowly opened, and the hinges creaked with each movement. Creak, creak. When Minh turned to look back, the person standing at the door was none other than Tung, his friend from their school days in Vietnam. Tung stood right at the door, but did not step inside. He just stood there, looking at Minh slowly. Minh was very surprised. "Huh? This guy is clearly in England, and I'm in America. How did he appear here?" Minh asked. Is that you, Tung? Why are you suddenly here?" As soon as he finished speaking, Tung stood there with a strange smile, his mouth stretched wide to his ears, looking very frightening. Then blood began to flow down from the top of Tung's head, spilling all over his face. Needless to say, Minh was terrified because he didn't think this was just a dream. It was only when he jolted awake that he realized. At that moment, Sweat was pouring down incessantly. A strong intuition suddenly arose in Min's heart. He was sure that the person named Tung had encountered something. Determined to clarify everything, Minh remembered that it was exactly 4 a.m. in the US at that time, and if converted to London time, it was 11 a.m. in England. Immediately, Minh jumped on his laptop, searched for contact information for the police in England, and made an international call. The police there confirmed that they did send that email, and the person named Tung had indeed gone missing. Therefore, they were trying to contact Tung's family in various ways. At that time, Minh was shocked, his mind completely confused. He immediately contacted Tung's family. After Tung's family worked and contacted the police department in London directly, about 2 weeks later, Minh received the news. It was reported that Tung's body had been found in a forest behind the creek near his home. Needless to say, Minh was extremely bewildered. Minh couldn't eat or sleep for an entire week afterwards due to haunting dreams about his old friend from Vietnam. It was too intense. According to information from the London police, they concluded that Tung had committed suicide. However, Minh and all his friends from back in the day did not believe it. Everyone thought Tung had been murdered. About 2 months ago, when they heard the news of Tung's disappearance, the whole group even organized an online drinking session together. At that time, Tung was boasting a lot about his future plans, graduating from university in England, and then returning to Vietnam to propose to his girlfriend. Tiang was someone with many ambitions. There was certainly no reason for him to commit suicide. Minh also added that many people may not know, but the issue of racism and discrimination against Asians in England is very severe, even worse than in the United States. Others feel this way too. Overall, in England, everything about this issue is very terrible. Additionally, since Tung is an international student and does not have British citizenship, Minh suspects that the police in London do not bother to investigate thoroughly. They quickly conclude that it was suicide to close the case. Although Minh and his friends know the truth might be different, they cannot do anything more. Right now, Tung's family has come to England to retrieve his body. Tung's cousins shared with Minh's group of friends that it is clear Tung was murdered, as there was a severe wound on his head. This is also why, in his dreams, when Tung appeared to Minh, a lot of blood was pouring down from the top of his head. Not only that, but Tung also had a strangulation mark on his neck and a stab wound in his stomach. Everyone, even though they know the truth, can only sigh and shake their heads in disappointment and sadness. Minh confided that, even now, he still hopes Tung will appear in his dreams so that he can see him again. Despite being very scared, Minh is determined that if Tung does appear, he will hold on to him and ask clearly what happened to his dear friend. And after the first spiritual story in a foreign land, we move on to the second story. This story takes place during the time Minh was training at the officer's school. Minh reiterates once again that neither he nor his family wants to discuss anything about politics. He hates having to talk about this issue and will end any conversation that strays into the realm of sabotage or is related to politics or ideology. Minh believes that, although he is Vietnamese, the reason his family came to America is simply that his mother remarried a Vietnamese-American stepfather. Therefore, Minh went there to study and work, completely without carrying any political ideology. Minh's stepfather is also someone who doesn't like to get involved in politics, focusing solely on business. After moving to the U.S. and graduating from college, Minh worked as an accountant for a large company for about 1 to 2 years. However, Minh was not accustomed to the corporate environment, so he decided to try the military. Minh candidly shared that there were several reasons for joining the military. First, it was related to his student loan debt. In the U.S., although college tuition doesn't have to be paid up front, the government essentially lends the money first. After graduating and starting to work, he would have to gradually repay that debt through taxes. If Minh joins the military and serves for a full 10 years, his student loan debt will be forgiven. Second, the military will cover all the costs of education so that Minh can obtain a master's degree. Third, Minh has always wanted to do a strong job in a highly disciplined environment rather than facing the complexities and factionalism found in a corporate office setting. Minh's experience began when he was selected and participated in training at the Army Officer School at Fort Benning, Georgia, in the winter of 2019. The training lasted for 12 weeks. Minh was assigned to share a room with a black friend named Jack and a Puerto Rican friend named Leon. The training was very strenuous, but everything was still manageable. Generally, the guys tried hard and could get through, and there was nothing related to spirituality during that time. Everything went very smoothly until the third week, when they started training in the land navigation section, which translates to navigation and wayfinding skills. To talk a little about this training section, there is an exam held in the forest, where all the trainees will be transported in the afternoon before the first day of the exam. After that, they will be read the exam regulations and will sleep outdoors in the forest that night. The usual sleeping area will be at a different gathering point. The exam lasts for 4 hours, starting about 2 hours before sunrise. The officers and sergeants overseeing the exam will provide each person with the coordinates of 6 locations. The first coordinate will be the starting position, and from there, the candidates will have to map their own route to find the remaining 5 points. The rule is that they must find at least 4 out of the 5 points to meet the requirement to pass. These points are marked by a very thin iron pole. At the top of the pole, there are 3 sides that form a triangular prism. On each side, there is a fluorescent orange sticker with a number or letter. When the trainees find a point, they must record that number or letter to present to the examiner. Then, the examiner will check if they have found the correct point. And, on average, each student will have to travel about 8 miles, equivalent to 13 kilometers, to find enough 5 points. If they pass on the first exam day, the students will be sent back to the gathering point. If they do not pass, they will have 2 more chances, but must sleep in the forest for the next 2 days. To train navigation skills and find their way, students are not allowed to use flashlights while moving. They may only use a very dim red flashlight when standing still to look at the map. Strict compliance with the rules is mandatory, and talking to others is prohibited. The exam supervisor emphasized this, and students need to remember it well. The rule against talking to others will be strictly monitored by the supervisors and school officials. They will patrol to check, and if anyone is found violating this rule, that person will be immediately disqualified. Before the exam begins, each student must submit their phone to the supervisor. The phone will be placed in a small bag, sealed, and returned to the student to keep until the exam is completed. And this phone here, it can only be torn open in case of emergency. For example, if you get lost, or if you're too tired, or if you are being chased by wild animals, or if you are completely disoriented. And once the envelope, this sealed bag, is torn open, It means that the student accepts the risk of failing the exam on that day. They warn that there are wild boars in the examination area. If you happen to be chased by a wild boar, just climb a tree and then tear the phone open to call for help. Everything went smoothly until the afternoon before the first exam day. When the regulations of the competition were read out, Minh, along with his 2 roommates, Jack and Lion, and a few others gathered for dinner and chatted with each other. Let me add a little about the Puerto Rican guy named Leon. He is extremely skeptical about the supernatural, and whenever he hears anyone mention ghosts or spirits, he shows disdain and scoffs at it. Additionally, this guy has a really sharp tongue. And one of the reasons that Minh explained is that Leon comes from the slums. Although Leon is a very good-hearted person, he often makes inappropriate remarks. To put it bluntly, he often insults supernatural and invisible things. During the conversation that evening, someone in the team said that the forest where everyone was about to take the exam was haunted. As soon as he heard the word ghost, Leon changed his attitude. From being a very pleasant person, he became thoughtless in his speech and insulted everything. In fact, Leon even challenged, if there are any ghosts or demons in this forest, come out here, and I'll beat you all to death. At this point, the conversation stopped, as no one dared to say anything more. And at that moment, the supervisor who heard that statement turned to me and said, "You all shut up. Especially you, Leon, shut your mouth." After finishing the meal, everyone went to bed to regain their strength in preparation for the early exam day. At exactly 4:45 a.m., everyone woke up to perform personal hygiene, have a hearty meal, and get ready for the test that would begin at 5:15 a.m. By 7:15 a.m., the sun would rise, marking the official start of the orientation and navigation exam. When hearing about the exam, I had already thought it would be difficult, but when I actually started, it turned out to be many times harder. The forest was extremely dense, especially the woods in Georgia, where the trees were tall and thick, with roots sprawling everywhere. There were many swamps in the forest, and it was completely normal to encounter grass taller than 2 meters. At that time, the darkness was pitch black. Minh remarked that if someone stood about 3-4 meters away, you wouldn't even know they were there. What made it even more challenging was that the checkpoints were placed anywhere from 100 to over 400 meters deep in the woods or near wetlands. Many times, even when I knew I was close to a checkpoint, I still couldn't see the pole and the 3 reflective signs at all. During the competition, many participants fell because they tripped over tree roots, couldn't see the hillside, or bumped into each other. Going back to that day of the exam, Minh had successfully found the first 2 checkpoints. But when it came to the 3rd point, he couldn't figure it out, even though he was sure it was very close. At that moment, he accidentally looked around and saw someone running out from the bushes quite close by. Although he knew there was someone in front of him, Minh couldn't see clearly who it was. He was very happy to meet another participant in the pitch-black forest, but he also felt a bit anxious since it was his first time competing. Immediately, the other person made a chest sound and said, "There's a point in front of us. Follow me, I'll show you." Knowing that interacting with others was cheating, Minh was too tired and frustrated after running around for an hour without finding the point. In the end, he decided to ignore it and follow that person. At that moment, Minh kept running briskly after the person in front of him. The distance between the two wasn't too far. You can imagine that, in that dark forest, it was very dim. If he went just a little further, he would surely see nothing at all. Therefore, Minh maintained a safe distance. After a while, the other person pointed ahead and said, Look, if you turn there, you'll get there. Minh looked forward, and indeed there was something orange, resembling a fluorescent light on each post. He ran a little closer. Oh my God, at that moment, he was overjoyed. Finding the third post, he suddenly noticed an extremely bright light appearing from behind him. Minh immediately turned around and discovered it was the headlights of a truck belonging to one of the supervisors, who was a sergeant. He ran toward Minh with an incredibly angry expression. He shouted, "Minh, what are you doing here?" Minh replied, "I found one of the 5 markers up ahead." But the sergeant roared, "You turn back immediately." At that moment, Minh thought to himself, this guy must be just trying to mess with me. Because for a while now, he had been joking around with the students a lot. So, Minh played along for a bit and said, "Hey man, stop joking around. I'm taking this exam seriously." At that, the sergeant's face turned red in patches. He yelled, The fuck? I told you you're going the wrong way. There's nothing that way. Over there is a cemetery, you fool." I would like to repeat that verbatim. Minh recounted that the sergeant cursed a lot, and when Minh heard the words, "Over there is a cemetery," he was stunned as he looked back at the direction he was about to run towards. Immediately, his eyes widened because of the scene before him under the blazing rays of the rising sun. He clearly saw countless large crosses planted on many graves. No need to say more. Minh was stunned and sat down on the ground, his spirit almost flying away. The sergeant immediately ran over, lifted Minh up by his armpits, snatched the map from him, and pointed to the bottom left corner. "Look here, see? You're way out here. You've strayed nearly 200 meters beyond the testing area. I need you to run in the direction I'm pointing. Run really fast, and absolutely do not follow anyone else, understand?" He spoke, emphasizing each word. Minh was taken aback by his remarks, his face a mix of confusion and fear. Before he could say anything, the sergeant replied first, "You don't need to be surprised. Do you think we emphasize that you have to find your own way and not talk to others for no reason? Just think about why I'm standing guard right here. Your job is to run quickly." At this moment, Minh was really scared, you guys. Minh ran as fast as he could towards the direction indicated by the sergeant. Minh still couldn't grasp what had just happened. After a while, Minh stopped to regain his composure as the sky was starting to brighten. Minh was no longer as scared. He tried to find 2 more points and decided to head back to the finish line since he had met the requirements to pass. Minh didn't expect that what he had just experienced was so terrifying for him, but it didn't stop there. Because the most horrifying thing in this forest didn't happen to Minh, but to his roommate. After the 4-hour test ended and an hour later, almost all the students had returned. Those who did not meet the requirements were taken to a separate area. At this time, when checking attendance, everyone was shocked to discover that one person had not returned. And that person was none other than the guy from Puerto Rico, named Leon. Knowing that something was wrong, all the invigilators and staff in the institute rushed out to look for someone named Leon. After nearly 2 hours of searching with no results, everyone became extremely anxious. At that moment, another student stealthily approached and spoke in a hushed tone, saying, "I think I heard it scream very loudly in the swamp area." As soon as he finished speaking, the chief superintendent, who was overseeing the examination, shouted loudly, "Why are you only opening your mouth to speak now?" Startled by the reprimand, the student froze and didn't say anything further. His expression was quite unusual. Although he had more to say, he knew for certain that he would just be scolded, so he chose to remain silent. After that, the staff and the proctors rushed into the forest following the directions and found Leon lying unconscious by the swamp. When they brought him back to the assembly point, Leon began to regain consciousness. However, his face was pale, his eyes were extremely vacant, and his body trembled slightly, as if he had just gone through a horrific experience. The staff, however, believed that Leon had simply not drunk enough water, resulting in dehydration and fainting. After gathering all the students and taking attendance, it was confirmed that the numbers were sufficient. The staff announced that those who had passed the exam today would be allowed to return to the assembly point to rest, while those who had not passed would have to stay at this location overnight. At that moment, it was clear that Leon, having failed the exam, would definitely have to remain here. Earlier, he had been sulking, not saying a word, completely silent. But upon hearing that he would have to sleep in the forest area, he jumped up and shouted, "No, fuck no, please let me go. I can't stay out here for another second. Just kick me out of the school, I don't care. Please, please." He cried and begged, and everyone was taken aback by his actions. As I just described, he is someone who grew up in the slums and has faced many hardships. He is incredibly resilient, both mentally and physically. On the outside, he looks tough and worldly, standing about 6 feet tall with numerous tattoos. However, witnessing someone with such an appearance react so intensely in a moment of sheer panic sent chills down everyone's spine. No one could understand why he responded so strongly, or what he had experienced in that forest. At first, the officials were still tough, scolding and demanding that Leon stay. But then, they quickly realized that he was truly panicked, as if he had lost control of his mind rather than pretending. Therefore, they agreed to let him go along with those who had passed the test that day. When he returned from the forest, Leon was still very dazed. He refused to eat, just sitting on the bed in the room and not participating in other activities. The room had 3 people, with a bunk bed and a single bed. Minh lay on the top bunk, while Leon lay on the bottom, facing the window. A black man named Jack lay on the adjacent single bed. That night, as Minh was sleeping soundly due to exhaustion, around 2 or 3 a.m., he was awakened by Leon's desperate screams from the bed. In a state of not fully being awake, Minh only remembered that Leon was screaming phrases like, "Oh my God, get away, get the hell away from me. Oh God, please, forgive me. I'm sorry, please forgive me. Please go away." Reacting instinctively, Minh and Jack, who had dark skin, both jumped out of bed and rushed over to check what was happening with Leon. At that moment, they saw Leon huddled in the corner of the bed, his body trembling violently, his face pressed down into the pillow as if he dared not look ahead. He looked as if he had just witnessed something truly horrifying. Minh and Jack tried to comfort Leon, but he continued to shake uncontrollably. Leon pointed towards the window, his voice quivering as he asked, "Did you guys see it just now? It was standing right there. Oh my God, it's not going to let me go. Please, you have to save me." At this moment, realizing that the situation was not good, Minh immediately called Jack to run down and summon the night supervisor. At this point, all the students in the area were awake, as Leon's screams were so loud that everyone was confused and did not understand what was happening. The night sergeant came up, took a look at Leon, and then listened to Minh and Jack recount all the events that had just occurred. After that, the sergeant picked up the phone to call the commanding captain and said, "Sir, I think you need to come to this place immediately. It's happening again. Remember," he emphasized, "it's happening again." "That's right. It's the student named Leon. The sergeant continued, "Yes, I know what to do." Then, he hung up. While waiting for the captain to arrive, the sergeant thought for a moment and then decided to call the medical area to report. "Yes, I need to urgently bring in a patient today. He has no injuries, but he is extremely agitated." There is a strange thing that Minh noticed. The attitude of the sergeant when he went to meet Leon was completely normal, showing almost no hint of surprise on his face. Minh was certain that this was not the first time a similar situation had occurred. About half an hour later, the captain rushed in. After listening to everything, he said that he and the sergeant would take Leon to the hospital. However, due to the fact that the captain's vehicle was loaded with many items, including the driver, it could only accommodate 2 more people. He indicated that after taking Leon to the hospital, he would return to pick up one of the 2 people, either Minh or Jack, to go into the hospital to take turns caring for Leon. The purpose was to help Leon calm his mind until he could be transferred from the auxiliary hospital to the main military medical center. The captain also made it clear that he would arrange for both of them to have compensatory rest time. For the time being, he would take Leon first and then return to pick up one of the 2 to stand by Leon's side. And of course, the trainees must follow the orders of their superiors. Jack immediately volunteered to go ahead. After the captain, the sergeant, and Leon entered the military medical facility, they returned to pick up Jack so he could stand by Leon's side. Minh recounted that he and Jack took turns keeping watch over Leon, each for 12 hours. Fortunately, Leon had his incident on Thursday, so the 3 days of standby fell on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, which did not interfere with their training. By the end of the 3rd week, moving into the 4th week, which mainly consisted of theory, both of them brought their laptops to study and handle necessary tasks. On Saturday morning, when Minh came to relieve Jack, Leon was being examined by the doctor at that moment. Minh stood outside talking to Jack and noticed that Jack's face seemed pale, as if he had just gone through something terrifying. Minh asked, "Are you okay?" Jack replied, "Hey man, I'm really scared being next to Leon right now. Last night, he woke up, borrowed a bunch of paper and pens, and started drawing some really horrifying stuff. You'll see when you go in to sit with him. I feel really sorry for him, but I can't bring myself to be close to him anymore. Thankfully, today is the last day." When the doctor finished examining Leon, another sergeant took Jack back to the concentration area. Minh entered the room and Leon had just been given a sedative by the doctor and was now dozing off. Minh placed all his belongings down and prepared to open his laptop to study. A little while later, Minh noticed a stack of papers on the table. Recalling Jack's words earlier, Minh decided to flip through the sheets one by one. A sense of horror overwhelmed Minh as he looked at the images on the papers. Indeed, the sheets caused Minh to freeze in place. The first sheet depicted a woman dressed in black American pioneer attire. American pioneer refers to those who ventured to settle land, migrating westward from the original 13 states of America. The outfit of the woman in the image resembled the typical clothing seen in movies about cowboys. In the picture that Leon painted, the woman is wearing a black dress and a black hood. However, her eyes are hollow and white, with blood trickling from each side. Her mouth stretches into a wide smile, resembling the character Joker from Batman, creating a disturbingly haunting effect. What terrifies Minh the most is the woman's arms, which are abnormally long. But it doesn't stop there. Her fingers are extremely slender, yet longer than her arms, and notably, the small, sharp nails add to the eeriness. Leon has a natural talent for painting, so these artworks appear so lifelike that the horror embedded in them is amplified manifold. The second drawing is even more grotesque. Leon depicts the woman standing on a tree, staring straight ahead. But the strange thing is that she is upside down, resembling a bat hanging from above. In the third drawing, Leon depicts an image of a wall alongside a window. The woman is standing behind the door, pressing her two hands and face against the glass. After staring for a moment, Minh gasps as he realizes that this image of the wall and window is indeed from the room in the barracks, where the three of them, Minh, Jack, and Leon, have been for nearly 4 weeks. But it doesn't stop there. In the fourth drawing, Leon illustrates a black man named Jack sitting by the window in the hospital room where Leon is lying. In the picture, Jack has dozed off next to the window, but just behind him, the woman in the pioneer dress is still standing with her hollow eyes and a terrifying smile on her face. At this moment, Minh finally understood that Leon had sketched out the instances when he met that woman. She had sought out Leon once more, right when Jack was sitting beside him. An overwhelming feeling of shock and a chilling sensation ran down Minh's spine as he began to wonder if perhaps, while he was sitting here, she was also appearing, standing right behind him, yet he couldn't see her. Fortunately, by divine intervention, around 5 p.m. that day, Leon was transferred to the main hospital, allowing Minh to return to the gathering point. Upon arriving, Minh and Jack tidied up the room after 3 days without the time or strength to do so. While cleaning, the two discovered a few small leaves stuck to the window right by Leon's bed. These leaves still had a bit of mud and soil on them. Instantly, they both realized that these leaves could only be found in the forest, particularly in the area where Team Timon had gone searching for a path the other day. The reason why one can be so certain is that there were absolutely no trees near their room in the focus area. Recalling the horrifying photos from before, they understood this more clearly. However, both Minh and Jack decided not to discuss this matter any further. Exactly 2 weeks later, they heard news that Leon had left the training course and returned to his family. That was also the last time Minh received any information about Leon. Things temporarily quieted down for a long time. Later, Minh graduated from the officer school and transferred to another unit to work. As time passed, the horrific events of that day gradually faded from Minh's memory. However, in March of last year, during a business trip, Minh unexpectedly encountered the sergeant who had been on duty the night Leon had his incident. They greeted each other and asked about each other's well-being. Suddenly, the sergeant mentioned the event from years ago. Minh asked, "Do you have any thoughts about that incident? Was it really just an accident for Leon, or did he actually encounter something supernatural, something truly terrifying?" Minh thought that the sergeant would laugh at him, considering him childish and superstitious. However, the sergeant's answer left Minh in shock. The sergeant said, "Sir, since this happened a long time ago and has been buried, I feel no hesitation in speaking about it. That boy, Leon, truly encountered a demon back then. How do I know this? Because both I and Captain, during that night ride, also came across that very demon. This means that, during that night ride, the sergeant and the captain also encountered that demon." Minh was taken aback by this and asked how they had encountered the situation. The sergeant recounted, "That day, the captain asked me to drive since he was still too sleepy. Leon had just settled into the back seat and immediately dozed off due to exhaustion. On the way, the captain and I talked to each other to relieve the tension. Suddenly, he fell silent, and I noticed the captain staring intently at the rearview mirror on the right side, and then he signaled for me to stop talking. At that moment, I heard a strange clattering sound coming from the rear door on the right. I looked into the rearview mirror and was so horrified that I nearly lost control of the wheel, to the point where the sergeant exclaimed, "Oh my fucking God." I saw an extremely long arm emerging from the sleeve, longer than the sleeve itself. It was reaching down from the top of the car and using sharp claws to try to open the back door where Leon was sleeping. Just think about it. At that time, I was driving at about 45 miles per hour, approximately over 70 kilometers per hour. How could a living person possibly jump onto the roof of the car? However, the captain told me to stay calm and drive faster. I tried to keep my composure, but I kept pressing the door lock button to reassure myself that the doors wouldn't open, even though it really didn't help much at all. The situation at that moment, according to the sergeant's account, was extremely tense. The captain sat in the passenger seat, and even though he didn't say a word, he already had a dagger in his hand. Looking at his face, I could tell he was just as tense as a tight string. As we tried to run toward the medical station, the sergeant ran right next to the military police vehicle parked at the entrance. He immediately asked the soldiers there if they had seen anything on the roof of our vehicle. They were quite puzzled by the sergeant's question, but replied that they hadn't seen anything at all. At this point, the sergeant was also sure that the other thing had left, so he felt relieved to take Leon inside. He sighed as he recounted the entire ordeal. "Oh my God. I just hope Leon can get out of here and go home safely to his family." Working in the military, and yet people still recount their experiences with such a fearful attitude, goes to show just how serious the situation is. After hearing the story, Minh shuddered. He was taken aback to learn that there were others who had experienced these crazy tales as well. And it seemed that was the end of it, but not quite. The sergeant continued, "Sir, do you remember that cadet who claimed to have heard Leon screaming in the swamp area on the day Timum was trying to find the way? Do you all recall that moment when they couldn't find Leon? There was someone who suddenly stood up, stammering with a terrified expression, saying they had heard Leon screaming right in the swamp area." At this point, Minh nodded and asked, "Yes, I remember that person." "What happened to him?" In fact, the other person did not dare to speak because he also witnessed a horrifying story. The sergeant recounted, "That afternoon, the other person, let's call him Peter, asked to meet with the group of supervisors, including myself and Captain, in the medical area. Peter said that he not only heard but actually saw. When everyone asked him what he saw, Peter replied that he saw a person, or rather something that Peter wasn't sure was a person, chasing Leon. Peter insisted that it had the shape of a woman wearing a dress like those in Western cowboy movies. This thing glided through the trees chasing after Leon, sometimes soaring above the treetops, other times moving underneath the branches like a bat. Its blood flowed from 2 eye sockets, and it had extremely long arms. Its fingers were also very long, swaying like vines. The image was incredibly eerie and bizarre. Leon, in sheer terror, ran into the swamp area and then disappeared completely. The man named Peter, partly because he was too fearful and had never dared to believe in the things he had just witnessed, and partly because he felt ashamed for having abandoned his classmate and being unable to help, did not dare to speak fully while still outside. When the new officials arrived, they listened to him and simply laughed. They thought Peter was making up stories and did not believe what he was saying. They told Peter to go home and said, "Don't talk about this outside. Don't say nonsensical things. Do you understand?" However, the reaction of the sergeant and those who had been here for a long time was completely different. They did not mock him like the new officials. In the past, They had heard reports of a similar case that occurred around 2019, not too far back, around 2015, 2016. That night, after the sergeant and the captain personally witnessed the demon hanging on the roof of the car, trying to open the door to drag Leon's body out, they completely believed Peter's story. It goes without saying that after hearing the story, the sergeant was still quite shaken when he recalled it. Mine, on the other hand, was haunted throughout the entire week that followed. First of all, he was overwhelmed by fear. Secondly, mine felt deeply saddened for his roommate named Leon. Although Leon was a rough person, he was extremely kind-hearted and had helped Minh a lot during their 3 to 4 weeks living together. In the last sentence of the email, mine wrote, "I hope that the person named Leon has safely overcome that experience, and that thing, or, more accurately, the demon in the forest has left him alone." And here's the end of the first big story. And now let's move on to the second big story, which is about a younger sibling named Mai, who sent it to me. The first event that Mai recounts happened in 2018 when she was in 10th grade. That year, people said that at her age, one would often encounter a lot of bad luck. However, since her family is Christian, and she herself didn't really care much about things like age-related misfortunes or similar matters. However, she noticed that indeed, that year, almost all her friends encountered bad luck. Some had accidents, some were bitten by dogs and had to stay in the hospital, and many other incidents. In March of that year, while she was on Kong Ho Street, heading to the canteen where her parents sold food, she had an accident. She clearly remembers a man carrying goods who was transporting a neatly packed cardboard box. But unfortunately, he brushed against her handlebars, causing her to fall. Before the accident occurred, she had a feeling that her mind was very hazy. It was as if she was riding a bike, but letting everything drift away. Her mind was blank. When the collision happened, she couldn't react in time and fell onto the road. Her body fell freely to the right, and when Mai's person touched the ground, Mai felt a bit dizzy. But Mai clearly remembered falling right in front of 2 trucks. Fortunately, they braked in time, and luckily, the ancestors in heaven must have protected Mai to escape that accident. After that, the driver got out to check on Mai, then helped Mai sit up. Everyone quickly took Mai to the hospital for the doctor to examine, as Mai's collarbone was broken and very swollen. That day, Mai had to stay in the hospital for observation. The next morning, the doctor checked again and indicated that Mai needed surgery to fix the bone with a plate and screws. That evening, when this news reached friends and relatives, they flocked to the hospital to visit Mai in large numbers. I will describe a bit about the room where Mai was lying to make it easier for everyone to imagine. The room had 6 beds, and Mai was in the bed near the window. There were only 2 patients in the room, Mai and an elderly lady lying opposite at the last bed in the room, like bed number 1 and number 6 facing each other across a large aisle. The elderly lady only had one relative accompanying her. After that, Mai's friends came in one by one to visit, shaking hands and celebrating with Mai for having survived the ordeal. Just staying alive is already a great fortune. But during the time I was in the hospital, a strange event occurred. A close friend of Mai's, named Anne, came to visit her. When Anne entered the room and picked up Mai's mother's phone to take a selfie, she captured the photo entirely with the phone's regular camera, without using any editing apps or filters at all. However, when both of them reviewed the picture, they were both stunned. In the photo, on the glass door, the reflection of a figure was clearly visible. This person looked as if they had been burned to death. Their eyes were dark and hollow, and they had no hair. Needless to say, the two girls were very scared when they saw that picture, hair-raisingly so. When this story was shared with Mai's close friends, Mai and Anne even showed them the photo. Everyone said, "You must have encountered a ghost," because everyone knows that hospitals are places where many people have passed away. Mai also confirmed once again, at that time in the room, besides me and Anne, there was no one else. The bed next to us was empty, and there were no people in the hallway. So who is the woman in the picture, if not a ghost? And that night, Mai was also teased by a ghost. You know, above each hospital bed, there is usually a cabinet for personal belongings and medicine. I kept feeling the bed shake, and the medicine cabinet kept banging, creating a continuous clack, clack, clack sound. But fortunately, Mai's personality is quite brave. Even though that happened, she was still not too scared and continued to sleep normally as if nothing had happened. After that event, everything was still fine. Mai's energy seemed really strong because Mai had never experienced anything spiritual directly before. But since Mai was discharged from the hospital, just about a week or two later, Mai went out to eat with a close friend. This friend is a boy, tall and muscular, so Mai felt very safe walking around at night. After finishing the meal, the two of us walked and chatted happily. But then suddenly, about the last 15 minutes before he took Mai home, he fell completely silent, not saying a word. His face looked very strange, completely different from before. After dropping Mai off at home, 15 minutes later, when he got home, he sent Mai a message. "Hey Mai, earlier, when I was with you, I saw someone crawling behind you. Its limbs looked like a spider. Its face was pale white, with two pitch-black eyes, and it had no hair." This male friend described exactly the image that Mai's close friend had captured on her phone while Mai was still in the hospital. The strange thing is that Mai had never told this boy about the ghost encounter in the hospital, but his description was exactly the same. This is not the end yet. There's one more evening that Mai cannot forget. That time, Mai was out to eat with her boyfriend. Mi's boyfriend has low energy, so he often encounters spiritual matters. That day, her boyfriend was driving Mai, who was sitting in the back. When they passed by a section of the road, right near a high school, where there was a milestone, suddenly, her boyfriend became silent. From that moment until Mai was taken home, not a single word was spoken. When they arrived, her boyfriend texted Mai, "Earlier, I saw someone crawling across that road." Mai's boyfriend described it exactly like the image that the male friend in the previous event had recounted, with limbs resembling a spider, a pale face, and two pitch-black eyes with no hair. What is notable is that Mai had never told her boyfriend about what had happened or the image of the person she encountered in the hospital. Yet these two described it exactly the same. Fortunately, after 3 such occurrences, everything gradually faded into oblivion. Mai and those around her no longer encountered the image of the burned corpse with the bald head and those deep-set eyes ever again. And as I said, Mai's house is Christian, so there are many altars in the house. There is even an altar for the ancestors, but in front of Mai's house, there are quite a few graves, so the spiritual energy must be very strong. As previously shared, Mai's energy is quite strong, even though she has never seen the spirits of the dead before. However, there was one time when Mai was sitting on a chair downstairs. Above her was the altar of the Virgin Mary. At that time, she didn't see it directly, but she said she was sleeping very deeply, only dreaming vaguely. In a half-awake, half-asleep state, she saw a woman lying face down on her right side. This woman seemed to be quite old, but she was wearing a white baby doll dress with long black curly hair like noodles. She lay there, and Mai couldn't move at all. This feeling was very real, making her certain that she had experienced sleep paralysis. And then Mai heard the voice of this woman, a whisper, as if she was saying something. Mai could hear this sound, but to say exactly what this woman was saying, Mai couldn't know. At first, the voice was very soft, but gradually it became louder, growing louder every day. It became deafening. Mai described it like the sound from a microphone pointed at the karaoke machine, creating a piercing echo. Mai couldn't take it anymore and tried with all her might to sit up. When Mai was fully awake, she hurriedly took her phone to text a friend to recount what she had just experienced, hoping to lessen her fear. After that, Mai turned to look at her brother as he was lying next to her at that moment. Mai shook her brother and asked, "Did you see anything?" Then recounted how she had just seen the woman lying beside her. But her brother did not respond, showing no signs of anything unusual. Suddenly, Mai felt the surrounding space becoming strangely cold. For the second time, Mai jolted awake completely from the dream. It felt like Mai was dreaming on top of another dream, but each dream was frighteningly real. Even at this moment, Mai is still thinking in her head, not knowing if she has truly woken up or not. Everything around Mai that she is seeing and feeling, could it be a third layer of dreams? Mai picks up her phone to check messages, but she doesn't see the previous messages that she clearly remembers sending, telling her friends about, as well as when she turned to her brother and asked him about it. At this moment, Mai looks at her brother's face, which is pale. He shakes his head and says nothing. By the next morning, when Mai asks again, her brother says, "Last night, I saw you mumbling, not saying anything at all, just lying there, not moving. I was really scared." A few days later, Mai went out with her close friend. Her friend drove Mai home, then turned back to her own house. On the way, she almost got hit by a car, almost as if someone were trying to do it on purpose. Both of them felt strange, as the near accident was truly perplexing. When her friend arrived home and was about to close the door, in just a brief moment of 1-2 seconds, she saw the silhouette of a woman standing at the end of the alley, right under a brightly lit street lamp, which cast light straight down. The image resembled a dream. Mai had once had a woman wearing a white baby doll dress with long, curly hair that looked just like Mai's. Terrified, her friend quickly slammed the door shut and rushed upstairs. Shortly after, she texted and called Mai to share what had happened. In the conversation, she described seeing an old woman dressed in white with frizzy hair, whose features were unclear but definitely seemed very strange. Mai was taken aback, as she had never told this friend about her sleep paralysis a few days prior and the dream of the woman in the white dress. Yet, her friend had accurately described that very image, exactly as Mai had experienced it. It is evident that the energy of little Mai is very strong. If the girl is followed by evil spirits or teased by others, Mai cannot see them directly, but can only recognize them through dreams. However, her friends who accompany Mai, especially on dark nights, if they have weak energy or are compatible with the evil spirits, will definitely see the evil spirits beside Mai. After that story, the two girls also limited their outings at night or coming home late to avoid encountering similar events. They felt the need to be more careful, not wanting to fall into such a frightening situation again. And here we have reached the end of the second great story, as well as the conclusion of our video for today. First of all, I would like to thank Minh and Mai for sending me the two stories we heard today. giving me the chance to share them with our audience. If you enjoyed the content of this episode, don't forget to like, share, and most importantly, hit the subscribe button, click on the notification bell next to it, and leave your comments below to increase interaction with the channel. This will help you receive priority notifications when I release the latest episodes, thanks to YouTube's algorithm. I also look forward to receiving emails from all of you at enjofuang@fenguangmedia.com. This is where I will be collecting your real-life spiritual stories that you wish to share with me. Thank you all once again. Goodbye, and see you in the next video.